Hypixel Skyblock has an obscene number of custom items. Behind me here is just 15% of them, and I'm on a mission to rank them all from best to worst. And because there's so many items, I've narrowed this video down to just the legendary rarity items. But even then, that's over 400 items, so let's start with the Terminator, the most powerful bow in the game. It does crazy crit damage and also shoots 3 arrows at once, earning the highest damage stat on our chart. Now it does cost 700 million coins for the base version, so the value for the amount you're spending is kinda meh, but even then it's still well deserving of S tier. Next up we've got the gold gift talisman. It doesn't look incredible, but purely the fact it's a legendary talisman that only costs about 20 million coins, I'm immediately putting it in A tier. That's a hell of a lot of magical power for less than a McChicken would cost you. Now I was only gonna go down to D tier, but after seeing the next item, the Great Spook Sword, I'm adding an F tier. It's absolutely worthless, absolutely useless, and absolutely gonna be our first contestant for worst item in the game. Next up is the Runan's bow. What used to be the best bow in the game has fallen into relative obscurity. The stats are rubbish and there's much better options out there. The only thing really carrying it in our chart is how good the Firth Sky texture pack team have made it look. B tier. The Wilson's engineering plans. It's the rarest drop from Blaze Slayer and its only use is to craft the SOS flare. And since the main cost of the SOS flare is everything but the Wilson's engineering plans, it's only worth about 7 million coins. D tier. Now I don't know what was going through the admin's heads when this next item was added. The Crown of Greed makes your hits do 25% more base damage, but costs you 100 times the weapon's damage in coins. So in any scenario where you'd want more damage, you'd be burning through your life savings in mere minutes. So to no one's surprise, it's going straight to F tier. One of the most asked questions I get is how to get more drops from your minions. The Scorched Power Crystal is a beacon fuel that lasts for 48 hours and gives you an extra 1% minion speed. So if you go offline and come back in 24 hours, you'll get slightly more drops, but don't do that with Inferno. The Hazmat Enderman is essentially the Freddy Fazbear of Hypixel Skyblock, in that when you drop one from an Enderman boss, it jump scares you into thinking you dropped a 400 million coin Judgment Core. It's also just a really shoddy power stone that would be criminal to put anywhere higher than D tier. So F tier. If you've ever wanted to recreate these videos while looking cool, there's only one item you need, the Racing Helmet. The only thing holding it back from being S+ tier is the cost. You'll be forking out close to 1 billion coins for one, so it gets S tier. The Kudra Follower Relic ranks really high in the rarity and utility categories. Not only are there not that many around due to the insane hunt the admin set up for obtaining it, it's also extremely useful in the Kudra boss fight, since it reduces the damage you take from Kudra Follower mobs by 65%. If you've ever seen my Kudra streams, you'll know those are the ones I usually end up dying to. S tier. The Art of War is getting a high ranking no matter what. It's also a decent item, giving any weapon you apply it to an extra 5 strength. So A tier. There's only one category this next item can go into. It actually quotes the previous item in its description, bestowed by Hypixel to the winner of the Great Potato War. It also says that in the description, but I couldn't have said it any better myself. The Potato Crown, S+ tier item. Next is the Necron's Helmet. For some of these I'll bundle together the armor sets, but I had to mention the Necron's Helmet separately, because despite it being part of one of the best dungeons armor sets, nobody uses the helmet. F tier. I'm also gonna real quick put Holy Dragon armor in F tier for the exact same reason, because who in their right mind has ever considered using it? The next item I have a personal vendetta against. I visited an obscene amount of dark auctions to find it, and then ended up just buying it when it came up for a friend. The Eccentric Painting Bundle is kinda useful, but it's going in C tier for no reason but my lack of RNG. Now I really like the Hellfire Rod for one main reason. It helps cut down one of the most tedious grinds in the game, trophy fishing. I dread to think how long the 15 diamonds I've currently caught would have taken without it. A tier. But on the topic of tedious grinds, I streamed the journey to getting the Dojo Black Belt live for 7.5 hours straight. Overall, it's not worth your time if your ping is above 100, so D tier. Now the next one's a little tricky to rank, because at face value 600 million coins for a legendary talisman, that's kind of terrible, but if you ever plan to do Master Mode in dungeons, the tier 7 Master Skulls plus 10% strength and health, whilst in Master Mode will will help a solid amount. So I think B tier is fair for this. I should also mention that I'm going to do a giveaway, however most giveaways seem to be boring and not stuff people actually want, so I'm going to let you guys decide. Whichever item appears in the comment section of this video the most, I'll give one away in my Discord server. The only condition is the item has to have been mentioned in this video, so choose wisely. If you've hated the video so far and you want to make me and my purse cry, go comment something like "give away a Hyperion" and join my Discord server if you want to see the aftermath of that. We've also given away well over 100 rank upgrades in the last 6 months in my server, so if you feel like joining my community, it'll be on screen now or the top link in the description. I just know this is going to be detrimental to my purse, but not as detrimental as the Artifact of Control, being the most expensive talisman in the game, with a low price on the auction house of 1.8 billion coins. That's for a legendary talisman with 0 other redeeming qualities, so in good conscience I don't think I can rate it any higher than D tier. Our next item's rating is kind of skewed because it comes at the end of trophy fishing, the Diamond Hunter armor. Since you can salvage it for roughly 700 million coins worth of magma fish, that is if you fully starred it at bronze hunter level and you haven't donated it to the museum. Now I have many bones to pick with the Skyblock admins, but one of the most painful was when they changed it so you can't salvage museum donated items. That change happened just a couple hours after I had donated my fully starred gold hunter set, costing me a couple 100 million coins. After the update where they soul banned cake souls, which I'm just not going to get into in this video, I think this change probably stung the most. Scrap that, the sign limit is definitely second. But if you didn't get screwed over by bad changes, the Diamond Hunter armor gets an A tier. If you're somehow watching this video in 2019, you may disagree with me on this next one. The Midas sword is, well, useless. Thanks to the ridiculous power creep in Hypixel Skyblock, it's been made completely redundant, with players only bidding on them in dark auctions to donate them to the museum for a tiny bit of Skyblock XP. I'm sorry, but the Midas sword is going straight to D tier. I feel like I've been shitting on most of these items, but there's almost nothing bad I can say about the Ditto Blob. Back in 2021, you could place a lot of skull items, so when there was a bug to take items out of the Skyblock menu, people could get their own player heads. And of course, when you changed your skin, it would update to whatever your head was set to, aka custom heads. I was lucky enough to obtain my own player head along with a couple other custom heads. For example, on my island, I've got a pig relic custom head that confused a whole bunch of people. All that to say, even though the Ditto Blob doesn't immediately give you custom heads, it makes life a whole lot easier for builders. In my hub rebuild, this is actually a personal bank button that was taken out of the Skyblock menu and then placed. Now all you need to do is combine a Ditto Blob with an actual personal bank item and you're good to go. Or if you truly want custom skull items, you can grind out bingo and buy a Ditto skull, essentially doing what I mentioned earlier to give yourself custom skulls. Somehow through all that rambling I didn't give it a rating, but it's gotta be S+ tier. I just love it. Ultimate Carrot Candy, due to a separate item added with the Rift, the Caduceus Feeder, I think I'm saying that right, has revolutionized pet leveling for people who don't want to grind. But more recently there's been another pet leveling update that's completely AFK after you've started it. I did have a whole rant about how bad the new pet leveling update was compared to Ultimate Carrot Candy, leading the Carrot Candy to getting a really good rating, but as I was scripting later parts of this video, they updated both Ultimate Carrot Candy and the new pet leveling update. Long story short, Ultimate Carrot Candy is great, but leveling your pets with the fan NPC is twice as good when it comes to cost. So I'm giving Ultimate Carrot Candy a B tier placement. Onto the Warden Helmet. Because it's one of the best items for damage, we just know it's gonna get a high rating. It's useful, your value for money's pretty good, especially considering its only real competitor is an Infernal Crimson Helmet, which on its own, without factoring in attributes, is gonna set you back a good couple 100 mil more than the Warden Helmet. I'll give the Warden Helmet S tier. Now alone, the Recombobulator 3000 is kinda meh, but when combined with all of my talismans, my magical power goes from 1068 to a whopping 1513. So even though its value is a bit shitty, it's still carried by the insane amount of magical power it can theoretically give you. It's also pretty useful on weapons. B tier. The Hyperion is up next, and I mean there's kinda nothing that can compete with it. I think it would be reasonable to say that the Hyperion is the majority of players' dream item, and that's for a very good reason. It's overpowered as fuck. S+ tier. If I asked you to name the stupidest item in Skyblock, which item comes to mind and why? To me, the Flex Helmet does, because it costs you money to wear it. Yes, you heard me right, to wear this helmet, you have to pay, by the second as well. Unlike the Crown of Greed we mentioned earlier that makes you do more damage but costs you a bunch of money, the Flex Helmet is just for show, so if you want to sit around around AFK all day showing it off, it would set you back 86.4 million coins per day, or a measly 31.5 billion coins a year. I guess that's the price for looking cool. Either way, D tier. The Ender Relic reduces the damage you take from Enderman by 25%, which when you're as skill issued at doing Enderman Slayer as I am, it comes in super handy. So now I have one, I only die 80% of the time. A tier. One of the weirder legendary items is Bedrock. Only ever obtainable once with a bug for less than an hour after the Dwarven Mines was added, it makes for a pretty cool collector's item. And it's kind of funny having multiple pieces of bedrock placed around your island. A tier. We haven't covered much armor yet, so how about Diver's Armor? Despite being the 5th best fishing set out of 9, it's the 2nd most expensive behind Magma Lord. And you'd expect it to have some cool perk, making it super popular and pricey, but it just launches you forward when you touch water. It was a fun distraction from writing this script, but I really don't need more of those, so in my book it gets F tier. Another silly expensive talisman is the Hegemony artifact. It does cost over 800 million coins, but its perks double the magical power it gives you, so it's slightly more reasonable. Even then, it's only going to be owned by the endgame players, or I guess people who sell all their worldly possessions just to buy one. B tier. The Daedalus Axe is a pretty unique one since it copies stats from your active pet. So when my co-op and I were farming for the first Garden Space Helmet, we actually used a Chimera 5 Daedalus Axe to get max farming fortune when farming cocoa beans, which definitely sped up our journey, and for that it's going in A tier. This next legendary item has a feature well worthy of placing it into S+ tier. When you punch someone with the Great Spook Staff, like the name implies, it spooks them. There's a variety of things it could tell the player you're spooking, like them being kicked from their guild, their Skyblock profile being deleted, or receiving op on the Hypixel server. These are obviously quite comedic, but the feature's currently disabled and has been for quite some time. Why? Well, I'd have to assume it's because one of the spooks was a friend request from the late Technoblade, which after his unexpected passing just wasn't appropriate to keep in the game. However, instead of just removing it as a spook, they disabled the whole feature, which just feels like lazy coding. D tier. Heavy pearls are an odd one because they're automatically soulbound. They are incredibly useful for starring Kudra armor and trophy hunter armor, so I'll give it a nice B tier. I do feel like I've been quite rude to some of these items, so I'll try and be a bit more positive. Fermento armor was honestly a great addition to the game. It's reasonably priced and unreasonably useful. S tier. Okay, I take back what I said before about being nice. The digested mosquito is shit. It's the rarest drop from Spider Slayer, but somehow every time I've dropped it, I've had to hold myself back from throwing it in the void. It's that worthless. Its only use is in the crafting recipe for the mosquito bow, which itself is also shit, and ridiculously expensive. So for the digested mosquito and the mosquito bow, I wish I had a lower tier than F to put them in, but G tier sounds weird, so F tier. There are very few items in this game that I think are really cool. One of those being the tier boost, since it increases the rarity of your pet by 1. An example of why I love this item so much is because instead of getting 2000 Kudra score for the epic Kudra pet, which I wanted for its trophy bait perk, I only had to get to 500 to get a rare Kudra pet, which I then tier boosted. This significantly cut down the amount of grinding I'd have to do, both in Kudra, but also the perk I wanted increases my chances to catch trophy fish by 20%, and that calculation is also multiplicative, so my trophy fishing grind is going to be a bunch shorter too. In other words, the tier boost is getting S tier, and the tier boost core used to craft it is getting S tier too. Now, most cheap armor sets you won't see endgame players using, but Sorrow armor is a rare exception. Having no requirements and giving +5 magic find per piece worn, it stays consistently useful until someone has maxed attribute Crimson armor, for example, so I'll give it an A. Similar to the Runan's bow I mentioned earlier, superior dragon armor was the best of the best, but over the last 3 years, so many better and cheaper armor sets have been released, so beyond using it to get a little bit extra pet luck for killing dragons or crafting pets, nobody really cares about it, and that includes me, so it's going in C tier. If you've ever wanted to max all your skills, at some point you're going to want to tackle foraging, and since it doesn't look like the foraging update is coming out before 2030, you'll either suffer by doing it manually, or use a semi-AFK method during Maya Derpy, like I showed off in this video. But either way, you'll want as much foraging wisdom as you can get, and one of the weirdest ways you can obtain it is with an annihilation cloak. Now, why does some random Blaze Slayer cloak give foraging wisdom? Fuck if I know, but it will set you back around 300 million coins. So even though it helps a very small amount with leveling foraging, it's getting B tier. The Dark Claymore is the best possible berserker weapon, and in the short time I had a hypermaxed one before selling it to buy a raffle space helmet, it was really fun to use, especially with the added swing range. S tier. But you know what definitely isn't getting S tier? The Jerry 3D glasses. It's a useless item that upgrades a useless pet from legendary to mythic, giving it yet another useless perk. F tier. A few months ago, I witnessed something pretty silly. There was a new command added to enter specific backpack pages. So for example, one could do /BP6 and it would open backpack number 6. The only problem with that is admins forgot to disable it in the Rift dimension, which to their credit had only been added 6 days prior, but still, I'd hope for some level of coordination between Skyblock devs. It caused absolute chaos for the few hours after. A bunch of Rift-only items had been transferred to the main world, but more importantly, some people thought it would be hilarious to transfer main world items into the Rift. And hilarious it was, giving us clips like this of someone using unstable dragon armor, which usually serves no purpose, to one-tap the highest tier of slayers in the Rift. So for that reason and that reason only, unstable dragon armor is going into S tier. The Art of Peace I don't think I've ever seen used by people who don't just have money to spare. It costs 50 million coins and gives you an extra 40 health when applied to armor pieces, so to me it's just a bit of a waste. D tier. Earlier we gave the Terminator S tier, and I don't think it would be fair to give the Judgment Core used to craft it any different. Another item that's pretty cool but doesn't seem to have many uses is the Precursor Eye. The majority of people use it for Kudra or just to tick it off in the museum, so it's getting C tier. The aspect of the dragons just isn't very useful either. D tier. If you want to consistently lose money to rigged gambling in Skyblock, the high-class Archfiend dice is perfect for you. F tier. Infernal Hollow Armor. There's no way anyone but Future77 owns one of these. D tier. Guild Splash equipment, even though it's really expensive, I did not mind paying that to speed up trophy fishing. S tier. The Last Breath is used against dragons in Master Mode Floor 7. Even though I've only ever been carried in M7, I know it's pretty useful. A tier. I'm so glad the Builder's Ruler was added with the Garden update. It made farms 10 times easier to build. It's gotta be A tier. Even though the Golden Treat was added in 2019, it still has 0 uses. D tier. Scythe Blades were always a really painful drop because it reset my RNG meter, so I'm giving that C tier. But the Reaper Orb crafted from them, reasonably priced legendary talisman. B tier. Jumbo backpacks, as everyone would probably agree, are S+ tier. With a full set, they give you more storage than your Ender Chest, and I love it. The Washed Up Souvenir, I've always used it for fishing and it's helped me get to 100% sea creature chance. B tier. I don't think I've ever seen anyone using perfect ruby gemstones on anything but Mastiff armor as a meme, so F tier. I definitely wouldn't have completed Vampire Slayer without the luscious Healing Melon Rift item, so instantly S tier. Axe of the Shredded was kind of insane for rev trading a few years back, but I don't think I've used mine since, so I'll limit it to A tier. Similar to the Healing Melon, the amount of times my Florid Zombie Sword saved me whilst I skill issued in dungeons is kinda insane. A tier. The Hilt of True Ice I've only ever seen in those Yeti sword craft scams where they ask for collateral, then give you a similar looking item to what you need to craft it that's worth about 10 coins. F tier. I haven't actually played Dungeon since the Fell Skull was added, but it's used in some interesting things, so C tier. Inferno Apex. Spooky Water Orb. I hadn't heard about this item until writing this script, but apparently it's used to craft the Bobbin Time enchantment, which is one of the least cost-effective ways to get more fishing speed, but isn't actually that bad for other fishing stats like Fishing Wisdom. There's also the Shark Water Orb, Winter Water Orb, and Lava Water Orb. My god, that's a mouthful. All used for the same thing, so they're all going in B tier. The Shadow Fury was one of my first weapons in Skyblock, as one was gifted to me, so it will always have a special place in my heart. It's also kind of fun to just teleport around with it. S+ tier. Now the personal deleter is quite silly and has had its fair share of bugs, one of which was when people put ancient elevators in them and it wiped their NBT data, creating these funny looking ancient elevators with the lore saying dollar store. S tier. Melon Dicer 3.0. I'm so glad the higher tiers of this were added because it really sped up the garden journey by so much. Same goes for the Pumpkin Dicer 3.0, and both are getting A tier. Werewolf Armor is apparently used for killing golems because of the ferocity it gives you, but that's such a niche use, it gets C tier from me. For some reason, the very official Yellow Rock of Love is on this list. It is a quest item, but it does lead to a legendary talisman, so I'll put it in B tier. The Lively Sepulture chestplate is another Rift item that served me well. A tier. I think most people who have completed all the regular dungeon floors have at some point donned Shadow Assassin armor, so I'll give it an S tier. The Vampire Dentist Relic. Reasonably priced legendary talisman. B tier. Burning Aurora armor. I haven't done enough Kudra to have it yet, and I know that's embarrassing, but I'm pretty sure it's better than hot. B tier. Joining the Prey RNGesus drops with only one slightly terrible use is the Sub-Zero Inverter from Blaze Slayer. It's got a 0.09% drop chance and is worth around 1 to 2 million coins. F tier. Infernal Crimson armor. I've only heard good things about it, and at some point I do want to grind enough Kudra to level my setup to Infernal. It's on a similar level of nothing can compete to the Hyperion, so it's gotta go S+ tier. The Wand of Atonement, similar story to the Florid Zombie Sword, I would often run those together so I wouldn't die. A tier. I would be putting the Giant Sword in A tier too, but I've never dropped one, so B tier. Ignore the fact I've only ever done like 115 floor 6 runs. The Pig Mask has gotta go S+ tier too, I don't think there's any explanation needed. Divan's Alloy is a pretty insane drop, 3 billion coins if you get lucky. S tier. The Aurora Staff is an interesting one. It would get a high ranking, but back in a Creator Clash Bestiary tournament, my team and I came second because another team of geniuses figured out the Aurora Staff has no requirements, so they spent the entire time killing Zealots, giving a shit ton of points for each. Well played, but the Aurora Staff is going C tier, because I'm still ever so slightly salty. The Jacobus Register is basically a free legendary talisman, because it's unlocked by buying more accessory slots. That's gotta give at least A tier. Great White Shark Tooth, decent drop from sharks, B tier. Perfect Amethyst Gemstones do give defense, so I guess tanks can use them to their advantage. Still C tier. Strong Dragon Armor is okay for the early game, but after not too long you'll move on to something better, so I'll give it C tier. Another lifesaver when it comes to skill issuing in dungeons is the Spirit Mask. S tier. Further Armor is meant to be a tank for outside dungeons. Only problem with that, there are almost no use cases for a tank outside dungeons. When it's maxed out, sure you can tank anything that doesn't do true damage or percent damage, but that doesn't really mean much when you can't do a lot of damage. F tier armor set. Perfect Topaz Gemstones are pretty essential for mining, and so are perfect Amber and Jade, so I'll give them all A tier. I ranked the Warden Helmet S tier earlier, but since you need a few more things to craft the heart into the helmet, I'll give the Warden Heart an A tier. The X655 drill I don't like because I'm missing it from my museum and it costs like 400 million coins, so even though it's a pretty great drill, it's only getting B tier. An item I don't think I'll ever get is an enriched Kudra chunk, but it gives you the legendary Kudra pet with a nice perk, so B tier. I've talked about like 60 million coin talismans being reasonably priced. The Bat artifact is 3.5 mil. That's gotta put it in A tier. Base Crimson Armor is honestly better than I expected. A few months ago I was one-shotting Enderman Slayers with it, so not too bad. B tier. The Spirit Scepter is alright for the price. It's used by a lot of low kata level mages, and with only a floor 4 requirement I can see why. It deserves a solid A tier. If you removed the vitamin death from the game and didn't tell me, I probably wouldn't notice, it's that irrelevant. It just clogs up my inventory in dungeons, and now that I think about it I should probably put one in my personal deleter. F tier. The next item makes for a really shit AFK money making method. If you hold 35 bottle of Jur in your inventory for 300 hours, you'll have 35 refined bottle of Jur. You can then sell them on the bazaar for about 100 million coins. That's a whopping 333k an hour, but if you have your full co-op of 8 people doing it for a month straight, that's 1.8 billion coins. Realistically, with this many coming into circulation, the price would plummet, but it's still funny to think about. B tier. Wither Armor. Once combined with the correct floor 6 giant drops, it becomes a lot better suited for whichever class you choose, but the base Wither Armor isn't even that bad on its own. Definitely good enough to be put in B tier. Magma Buckets are a pretty consistent way to liquidate a bunch of bits, but they're also a really useful minion item too. A tier. I seem to remember using the Pigman Sword for more defense when I was doing Enderman Slayer, but I haven't really seen another use for it since, so D tier. The Fancy Tuxedo Armor is an odd one because it's been in the game since the original Foraging Islands were added in November of 2019, and it's never really seen much use. By the time its price tag of 20 million coins was achievable for most players, soon after was the 75 million coins for the Elegant Tuxedo set. Before the API changes in August of 2023, there were just 2,400 Fancy Tux sets compared to the 7,000 Elegant Tux sets existing in public inventories. So I'll give the Fancy Tuxedo Armor a C and the Elegant Tux Armor an A. Back in 2021, I remember my co-op and I having a lot of fun flying around hubs with the Leaping Sword. And since the Silk Edge Sword is the upgraded version, I'll have to give it B tier. Frozen Blaze Armor I don't have any complaints about. It can be pretty great, especially when paired with a Blaze Pet. S tier. Base Aurora Armor. I mean, for the price of like 2 million coins, it's pretty impressive. So I'll put it at the same as Burning Aurora, at B tier. Reaper Armor I've seen used in M7, Kudra, and even Blaze Slayer. So considering it was just designed to kill Revenant Slayers, I'm putting it in S tier. The Heated Reforge in my opinion is pretty mid, so the hot stuff item you apply to your drill to get it is going in D tier. Making this video has reminded me I'm currently borrowing my co-op's Plasma Flux and have been for the past year and a half. Sorry Thomas, S+ tier item, but you're not getting that back. I'll give the Plasma Nucleus used to craft it an S+2, cause why not? The Bubba Blister is one of the new Rift things that can be exported to the main world. As an actual Reforged stone it doesn't look half bad, but I've only got it unlocked for the 15 Skyblock XP. C tier. Young Dragon Armor armor is hands down my favourite dragon armor, mainly because its perk of increasing your speed cap by 100 is still useful today. I'm not actually sure what you'd need more speed for at this stage in the game, but it's getting A tier nonetheless. Hollow armor. It's just useless. It could have been really cool, but Kudra just doesn't need a healer, so nobody uses it. I'm only keeping it out of A tier because the concept of casting spells is kinda cool. D tier. The razor sharp shark tooth necklace is a reasonably priced legendary talisman on its own, but the 25% extra shark teeth during fishing festivals when you have one equipped, that's an A tier legendary item. The titanium relic is another reasonably cheap legendary talisman, and it gives you an extra 60 mining speed, and I'm a fan of that. A tier. Mixed might gel is a really cheap item that upgrades your endermite from legendary to mythic. It's cool, but the perk is a bit useless outside of adding to an already entertaining something like that video. It's getting a C tier. If you need a lot of ferocity, I guess the Reaper gem isn't bad. I can't say I've personally used it, but now they're soulbound, you have to buy a new one from Rusty for 20 million coins each, instead of the 1 million coins players used to list them at on the auction house. So it's going F tier. I've used a Rod of the Sea many times, not exactly for fishing, but collecting my fishing minions. This is because the cheapest rod I could find at the time with expertise 10 was the Rod of the Sea, so it has a special place in my heart. S tier. Goldor's armor is used by tanks in dungeons. I think B tier would be reasonable for what it is. The Vampire Fang upgrades your bat pet from legendary to mythic, and the 25% extra chance to catch spooky mobs is pretty decent, so I'll give it A tier. Since it was added, I've used the Shadow Assassin cloak in dungeons, and it seems to be the meta, as it is the only mythic dungeon cloak. S tier. The Hollow Wand is unfortunately meeting the same fate as the armor it gets its name from, so D tier. Another rift item I wouldn't have killed a tier 5 vampire without is the anti-bite scarf. I also love that it's literally a carpet on your head. That's gotta be at least A tier. I just checked the price of golden Jerry artifacts and Jesus Christ. What has happened in the recent months? 200 million coins? That, plus how insane it is for Iron Man gamers to obtain, is putting it straight to F tier. The random Century Cake bundle is honestly a really cool collector item that came out with the year 300 event. What can I say, anything remotely to do with cake souls is getting an immediate S+ tier. The Reaper Scythe is a funny one. Necromancy as a whole is quite a weird concept in Skyblock. If you want to learn some silly things about it, you can watch my good friend Thomas's video on it after this, but purely because of how goofy necromancy is, the Reaper Scythe is getting S tier. I haven't personally used the Blaze Tech ham radio, mainly because you unlock it at Blaze Slayer level 6 and I'm Blaze Slayer level 5, but it does look like a pretty good item and Deathstreaks always seems to keep one in his inventory and I'll trust his judgment. S tier. Condensed Mementos. I mean, there's not much to say, but I guess I appreciate that they exist so my inventory doesn't completely fill up with Mementos. B tier. The Fantastic Chocolate Chip is similar to the Bubba Blister. I like the 15 Skyblock XP, but will you ever catch me using it? Probably not. C tier as well. Infernal Terror armor is overpowered in Kudra. All the fellas carrying me would always be rocking Infernal Terror, so I'll give it an S tier. The Felthorn Reaper I haven't really had a chance to use as it was only added recently, but it seems like a discount giant sword, and I really like the swing range mechanic added at the same time, so I'll give it A tier. Hot Crimson armor is basically the same as base Crimson, so B tier. I honestly don't know how I would play the game without the personal compactor existing. It's immediately S+, just because of the sheer amount of time I know it's saved me over the years. Now back in 2021, my co-op and I used a glitch to trim nether portals down to 1 block, to make a 1x1 portal hub, and for the end part, the finishing touch was buying a dragon egg for like 5 million coins and placing it above this end portal. S+ tier for the good memories. If I recall correctly, I used a Scylla for leveling Wolf Slayer. It's basically a Hyperion, so giving it less than S would be criminal. As cool as an upgraded snow cannon is, it just feels entirely useless, so Frosty the Howitzer, I'm sorry but you're getting F tier. Burning Hollow armor, in my eyes that's no different to the base, so that's also getting D tier. The Valkyrie, again it's basically a hype, so S tier is the only reasonable answer. The Flower of Truth used to be great until it was nerfed, and then I think recently it's been buffed again, but that might have just been on alpha. Either way, there's better options out there, so C tier. Base Terror armor, I mean it's still pretty cracked in the last stage of Kudra, although I'm not sure how much damage came from me when I was using it, as opposed to my teammates who may or may not have been carrying me. B tier. Necron's armor is the go-to for anyone dungeoning. It's gotta go S+ because it's always been the best and it doesn't look like anything will come out to challenge it. The Pure Mithril gem upgrades your Mithril golem pet from legendary to mythic. I probably wouldn't ever use the 10% magic find perk, but who knows, it's definitely cheaper than a G-Drag. B tier. The giant fishing rod would be really highly ranked, because it's one of the few useful Shen's auction items. But there also lies our issue. It's a Shen's auction item, meaning very few get created and the price ends up being absurdly high. I'm talking like 3 billion coins high. In my opinion, not particularly worth it. C tier. Initially the spirit bow looks a bit pointless, but maybe the spirit item perk would be good. Nope. F tier. Hot Terror armor, also B tier. Final Destination armor, I mean it's basically the go-to for killing tier 4 Enderman, unless you're one-shotting, so it's gotta go in S tier. The Pyro Chaos and Death Ripper daggers. I'm eventually gonna need these for leveling Blaze Slayer, and I'm really glad I waited to start that grind, considering their price has gone down from around 1 billion coins each to just 200 million coins each in the last 6 months. S tier for making me not as poor. Apparently they're kinda useful too. Scarf's Grimoire gives you faster class dungeon XP. Sign me up. A tier. The Dungeon Orb is an infinitely generatable item that you need to activate your class abilities in dungeons. Except you don't need it, at least not since September of 2023, so now it's fully pointless. C tier. Protected Dragon armor is useless, that's about all I have to say. F tier. The Wither Relic is definitely needed for high level dungeons, but its price tag is getting a little bit crazy. So B tier. Fiery Crimson armor is basically infernal, but I'll give it A tier. The Enderman Cortex Rewriter gives us mythic Enderman pets, which in turn gives us an extra 40% combat XP when killing Enderman, speeding up spawning E-Man bosses so you can spend less time playing. S tier. The Crux Heirloom is a really nice Rift talisman, but not the best, just the legendary one, so I'll give it B tier. I've heard the Auger Rod is essential for Yeti fishing, and that makes a decent amount of money, so also B tier. I love having perfect Sapphire gemstones on my Aurora armor, they instantly get S tier. Another legendary dungeon set would be Storm's armor. It would be a crime not to put it next to Necron's armor in S+ tier. One would assume perfect opal gemstones would be used on armor doing Blaze Slayer, but everyone I've ever seen just uses Jaspers, making opal basically redundant. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it deserves F tier. Infernal Fervor armor. I basically said all I wanted to say about Fervor earlier, and I don't think it being infernal will change my opinion, so F tier. Atom Split katanas have always been great for killing E-Man slayers, whether that's killing them normally or one-shotting, so it's gotta get an S tier too. Null blades are used in crafting the Terminator and Atom Split katanas, so I'll give them an A tier for that. The Royal Pigeon is an all-round great item. You used to be able to just buy them off the auction house instead of only unlocking them after doing a bunch of commissions, so I had mine from the start and I loved it. S+ tier. Fun fact, on my first ever Minotaur kill, I got a Daedalus stick. Since then, any Diana I've ever participated in has been completely fruitless, so I'm convinced all my luck was used up in that one drop. So Daedalus stick gets B tier. Before buying a sheep with a Minos relic, I would always have a textbook on mine for the extra 100 mana. I probably should have been using a Shelmet, but oh well. C tier. Nutcracker armor was apparently used to get the highest magic find ever, and it also doesn't seem too shabby for winter fishing. B tier. Spirit boots are fun as fuck to use. If you haven't tried them, I would 100% recommend it. I spent a good 20 minutes running around the hub using these instead of writing this script. I don't think there's any practical use after they got disabled in dungeons, but I like them. A tier. The Shen's Regalia talisman gives you access to the Regalia room, where you can buy a couple kinda mid items. I've already mentioned the Art of Peace and given it D tier. There's also Divine Books that give you Magic Find, which you can buy on Bazaar for 1 mil more than they cost here, and a rotating item in the middle, which is usually a pretty terrible looking rock skin, although there is one other item, the Rat Jetpack, which is the only thing keeping the Shen's Regalia out of F tier. D tier. I would call the Shiny Rod a useful item, if and only if there are shiny pigs around, which has only happened twice in the history of Skyblock, once when Technoblade became mayor, and once on Skyblock's 3rd anniversary, making the Shiny Rod absolutely useless 99.9% of the time. B tier. Fermentos make farming slightly more profitable, and they're used to craft Fermento armor, so I'll give them an A. One of the cheapest legendary items would have to be the Helix. Apparently it's a 1.33% chance drop when completing a Crystal Nucleus run, but during the 50 runs I streamed, I swear I dropped like 20, and they're worth about 10,000 coins each. I hate them, and I'm sure many others would agree. F tier. Wood Singularity is comedic, because when combined with a recombobulated Great Spook Sword, it actually makes it divine, because even though it doesn't say so in its description, it increases increases the item's rarity by 1. A tier. The Rift necklace is the only legendary necklace in the game, and therefore it's the best when you're going for something like magic find or fishing speed. I like it and I'm glad they added it. S tier. The builder's one will always be S+ tier. The amount of time I've saved by using it is insane. Thank you 30 virus. Golden Jerry boxes, nice to drop, pointless to open, C tier. Reaper masks are a good tank helmet, B tier. Gold magma fish are used in crafting a bunch of really cool items that I couldn't live without, like the Hellfire rod, so A tier. Livid daggers are a great starter dungeon weapon, definitely wouldn't bash it, I'll stick that in A tier too. Hot fervor armor, still F tier. A soul whip was the first weapon I ever killed a ghost with in the Dwarven Mines. I think I still have my original one from like 3 years ago, which is pretty cool. A tier. Hypergonic Gabagool. Magma Lord armor is cracked for fishing, it's gotta go straight to S+ tier. The Shredder is a silly little fishing rod that I don't think anyone actually uses, mainly because there are much better options out there. F tier. Max's armor is another S+ because most dungeon gamers seem to use Max's boots, and they can always be changed to Necrons. The dungeon sack is beautiful, I hate when my inventory gets clogged up in dungeons, and the addition of the dungeon sack solved that. B tier. I haven't actually played around with the new garden update yet, so when I read the name Chirping Stereo, I had no idea what it was, but it looks like it could come in handy. B tier. Tessellated ender pearls, used for a bunch of crafts including the Terminator, but takes a whopping 128,000 ender pearls to make, so it's going in C tier. Bat person armor is the only acceptable thing to use when going for high spooky event scores. The highest position I've got by killing flares wearing bat person was number 17, which I'm pretty happy with. S tier. Shiny orbs, similar to the shiny rod, are just useless 99% of the time. I gave the rod a B tier, but the orbs are so worthless they can't be higher than D tier. Shark scale armor is pretty essential for progressing through fishing. B tier. Necron's blade unrefined. Essentially the wither armor of Hyperions. It's not got a specific class it's great for, but it's also not terrible on its own either. It's gotta go S tier. Revive stones, my beloved. I dread to think how many dungeon parties I would have been kicked out of had they not existed. S+ for this is only fair. The Ring of Broken Love is a rift talisman, but it gives you 80 extra seconds of rift time, and when you're as skill issued as me, that helps tremendously. A tier. Fiery hollow armor, still not making it out of D tier. The treasure artifact is kind of an expensive talisman, but if you do dungeons a lot, it's definitely worth it. B tier. Infini Vacuum Hooverius. Interesting name, it's another new garden item. So I haven't tried it yet, but it seems to be the best hoover, so I'll give it a provisional A tier. There are also shiny shards that you craft the shiny rod with, I'll give them C tier. Refined titanium is used in a bunch of stuff. The likelihood you own something that's been crafted with it is honestly quite high. A tier. Old dragon armor, similar to a couple of the other dragon armors, is just shit. Not even early game players should consider using it. F tier. Divan armor, however, insane for mining, can be used by people at almost any stage in the game and upgraded as you go. What more could one ask for? S tier. Eccentric paintings are used to get the bizarre reforge, and they're silly expensive, but the extra mana almost makes it feel worth it. B tier. Wise dragon armor is definitely one of the better dragon armors. I remember using it a lot in 2021, and I'm pretty sure my co-op still runs around wearing it to this day. A tier. The Yeti sword I'm pretty sure is the best weapon you can get on the Stranded game mode. I haven't seen it used much normally, but it's going in B tier anyways. Necromancer armor upgrades necromancy a little, and I'm all for that, so even though it's not exactly used much, I'll give it a B tier. The Reaper Magma Lord fragments make Magma Lord armor, and they're also a nice 3 million coins when you drop one, so I'll give them an A tier. Solo dungeon runs are a fantastic addition to the game, so Saul's recommendation is getting it. Shards of the Shredded always reset my RNG meter while rev trading, so as much as they're a decent drop, it still hurts me to look at one. C tier. I really don't know why I included all the tiers of Kudra armor, but the next one is Burning Fervor armor. Still F tier, nothing has changed. On the surface, the Pooch sword would be great, but there's just easier ways to kill Svens. D tier. The magic top hat sounds really cool, but all it does is make your legendary snowman mythic, giving snowballs a 50% chance to deal double damage. Seriously, who asked for this? F tier. A better example of a good mythic perk is the Lucky 7 perk on the Mythic Guardian pet, that gives you an extra 7% chance to get ultra rare books in the experimentation table. You get a Mythic Guardian with the Guardian Lucky Block, and I'm a big fan. A tier. Hot Hollow armor, still D tier. The Gemstone Gauntlet is another item I'm a massive fan of, and always will be. It's only like 15 mil, but it works so well. I use mine to get all the way up to mining 60 manually, with just the Gauntlet. S+ tier. Perfect Jasper gemstones are always gonna be great. great. Extra strength is very useful considering how combat-oriented Skyblock is. It's gotta go S tier. Fiery Aurora armor, also S tier because like I said earlier, fiery is basically infernal. The Cryo Powder Shard is used for making the Frosty the Howitzer snow cannon, and I've already put that in F tier, so that can join it. You know I'm a huge Necromancy fan, so the Necromancer Sword is going straight to A tier. The Infernal Kudra Core, even though it's expensive, it can certainly make that money back if you're playing a lot of Kudra, considering it gives you a 3% chance to get 1 tier higher attributes on items you drop. A tier. The Bone Meringue is slightly goofy because everyone used to use it when it came out, then it was nerfed into the ground, and just recently it was made a little better, so people use it in Master Mode Floor 7, or so I've heard. I'm not exactly a pro dungeon gamer myself. B tier. Remember the position 17 in a spooky festival I mentioned earlier? I probably wouldn't have been anywhere close to it had it not been for the candy relic giving me an extra 20% drop chance for candies. S tier. The Midas Staff, unlike its older sibling, is actually still useful, and since it's only obtainable during Maya Scorpius, the price for one is well over 300 million coins. A tier. The Astrea is the other one that's basically a Hyperion, so S tier it goes. Infernal Aurora armor is the best of the best when it comes to mage outside of dungeons. I really badly want to play enough Kudra to level mine up, especially as I already have nice attributes. S+ tier. Another Fervor appearance, this time fiery, but still F tier. There are a lot of legendary Abbey phones, all doing more or less the same thing, so I'll rate them together. The whole contacts concept is really cool, and so is having games on a little phone, but the games weren't implemented particularly well. Some of you may remember me playing Snake and Tic-Tac-Toe in an old video, and it did not go swimmingly. Overall, I'll give Abbey phones an A tier. Fiery Terra armor, also cracked for the last stage of Kudra, I think I'll give it an A tier. Great White Tooth Meal, it's used to make the Finwave equipment that can then be upgraded all the way to Gill Splash, so I'll give it a nice B tier. Booster cookies I'm a massive fan of. The whole concept of getting a bunch of perks, and then some currency you can use to recoup some of your losses is really cool. There's a good reason why I have 2 years and 9 months of cookie buff left, and I haven't been without it almost since I started. Whenever I play on a different profile without a booster cookie, it just feels like there's something missing. It's gotta go S+ tier. If there was a higher tier, I would even consider placing it in that. The Unfanged Vampire part used to craft the Vampire Dentist relic is a nice profitable drop from tier 5 Vampire Slayers. So even though I gave the actual Vampire Dentist relic a B, I'm giving the Unfanged Vampire part an A tier. Burning Terror armor is what I currently have, and it works fine in Kudra, although I do want to upgrade it at some point. A tier. Nether Stars are a pretty interesting idea to lengthen the whole Kudra grind. Would I say I'm a big fan of it? Not particularly, but it does make it a little more rewarding at the end, so B tier. The exceedingly rare Ender Artifact Upgrader is one of the 2 RNGesus Incarnate rarity drops from Enderman Slayer. However, it's only worth 4 million coins, and if you bought an Ender Artifact and combined it with your exceedingly rare Ender Artifact Upgrader, you'd actually be devaluing your item since the artifact is somehow worth 30 million coins more than the relic. The Bouquet of Lies is apparently pretty good for early game berserkers, and honestly it doesn't look horrible, so I'll give it a B tier. The Perfectly Cut Diamond upgrades an armor set with a horrific number of armor pieces to give it even more armor pieces that nobody will use. There are literally 13 tiers of perfect armor, giving us 52 individual pieces. I may have accidentally excluded a few things while cutting this list down from over 500 legendary items, so apologies for that, but the Perfectly Cut Diamond and Perfect Armor as a whole are both going in F tier. Subscribe!